Good morning, everyone. I would like to give you a brief discussion. Let's have a brief walkthrough of your lesson one. So I will be recording my discussion so that if you have access to it, you will be able to benefit from this one. So your lesson one is all about information from various sources. Okay. So this lesson deals with getting information from various sources in everyday life. Okay, so you are being bombarded by available resources and data everywhere, from social media to your television to any other different platforms wherein you can get a lot of information. Okay, so you see, there are news reports, speeches, some informative talks, that you usually share on your Facebook accounts. Okay, you have panel discussions. So getting information will basically expose you not only into a pool of information, but it should also help you identify which details are factual or not. So normally, class, we have what you call TMI. We are bombarded with too much information, and a lot of those information, if you are not critical enough, if you do not know how to identify which one is factual or not, you are exposing yourself to the risk of sharing the fake news, diba? Okay, so you're expected to identify certain details from different sources and use them from various contexts. So for task 1, you have in your answer sheet, you're just about to check those that personally deals with uh, how do you personally deal with the information that you encounter. Okay? So from those boxes in your learning task 1, you're just about to say you're just about to check which one applies to you. So let's try doing that one. Okay. So I try to determine if the content in an article is worth knowing and relevant. So ikaw, ginagawa mo ba yun? Tinatry mo bang i-determine kung yung binabasa mo ba ay kapaki-pakinabang o mahalaga? Mahalaga, relevant sa'yo. Okay, if that is you, then you put a check mark. Okay, number 2, I assess the content through its relatedness and importance in my future goals. Do you assess the content? Okay? So, pag feeling mo, yung binabasa mo ay related at may kahalagahan dun sa mga future goals mo, pero kung hindi mo yan ginagawa, laktawan. Next, I appreciate the content of a text because it fits my plans in life. Aside, for example, na-appreciate mo yung content dahil future mo ang maging doktor. Gusto mo yun. So, kaya na-appreciate mo anything that reads and that fits your plans. That is related somehow to your goals. So, you can check that. Kung hindi naman, laktawan. Okay? Next, I evaluate the information presented in every printed material that I read, particularly those which affects my personal views. Do you do that? Do you evaluate the information in every printed material? Ako, I don't do that. I don't usually read or evaluate those that are presented in each material that I read. Kaya I do scans lang sometimes. So I compare the information I read to my previous learning. Of course, we do that when we read. Yeah. I value the content in current reading articles because I have experienced that before and I have learned from it. Yes, if that is you, leave it if it is not. Okay. I am affected by personal speeches and discussions as I choose my career goals. So, for example, meron ka nakita sa Facebook or Instagram, Twitter that is somehow, it tweaks your interest, for your career goal. So, you do somehow listen to it, you save it for future references. So, if that is you, you can put a check mark in there. Next, I apply what I have learned from articles and discussions in every aspect of my life making me a better individual. So if that is you, put a check mark. If not, then leave it. Okay? So that's all for your learning task one. It's all about self-assessment. Next, identify if the given item is primary, secondary, or tertiary. So here's what you're gonna do. We're just about to write from here. Could be a guessing game lang. You don't have to know anything about it. So you write, do you think that it's primary, secondary, or tertiary? So number 1, encyclopedia. So you write, primary ba siya, secondary, tertiary. It doesn't necessarily mean na dapat alam mo na. Okay, this is pre-assessment. Tingnan lang ni ma'am kung anong alam niyo na at hindi niyo pa alam. Okay, so that goes to you. How you are gonna answer that. Just write primary, secondary, or tertiary. Next. So you have sources of information. So this one's the discussion proper, ha? Now, there are various information that you may use finding significant details and data that can be used in your daily life. So they are classified according to primary, secondary, or tertiary sources. Now, when you say primary sources, they are sources of information that are authentic and they have not been subjected to evaluation or assessment. So, for example, class, those data that are first-hand, you are in the scene, nakita mo, you have witnessed everything, you can be interviewed as your words can be sources of primary information. Nakunan mo ng picture or something, or that anything that you discovered right at the moment of your research period, okay? That's an example of primary sources, okay? So we have several examples from here. You have primary source, number 1, speech. So when you say speech, these are formal addresses or discourses that are delivered to an audience. So, halimbawa, class, yung SONA, normally, yung mga dinadeliver ng presidents, like the manuscript speech, pinag-speech ka ng teacher mo sa unahan, impromptu or extemporaneous, those are examples of primary sources. Next, video recording. So, alam niyo naman what a video recording is. It's a recording, can be a film or for a television program, or it can be simply something that you do, on a daily basis. So, primary sources, pag nakakita kayo sa Facebook, first hand, nung mga ina-upload nilang video na nakukunan nila, nagva-viral, those are examples of primary sources too. Then you have photographs. So anything that was captured right at the moment that can serve as an evidence, those are examples of primary sources too. Okay, next you have government records. When you say government records, so those are recorded information in any form, that are created and received in government business, So, they were kept as evidence of activities and transactions in the government. Okay? So, anything from there that is all about their businesses and transactions are examples of primary sources. Pag nakakita ka ng published books or library material sa government records, hindi yun primary source. So, ang primary source doon yung mismong mga datas and reports na meron. Okay, or write-ups. Next, communication. Okay, when you say communication, can be as simple as the letter that you send to another person. An oral or interpersonal communication. Okay, that imparts or exchanges information or news. So those are also examples of primary sources. Next. Newspaper or magazine can be primary or secondary. So dito, primary source siya if it portrays information from the eyewitnesses. Okay? So kapag halimbawa itong you would see from here. Okay. Yeah. So you would see from this side na there is parang testimony from somebody. My impossible. I thought I was strong, starting in a new city without blah blah blah. So it could be an example of a primary source if it portrays an information from the eyewitnesses firsthand. Okay, next. Secondary sources, they provide information, discussion, or interpretation of the evidence. So, what you have in primary sources are evidences. Kapag na-interpret na siya, they are called the secondary source. Okay? So, these are also information written by authors who do not personally witness the event or action. So, therefore, they weren't there firsthand, but they did interpret the whole thing. So, this is an example of secondary source. What are those? So, number one, you have commentaries. It's a systematic series of explanation or interpretation. So, cite for example from here. The first sentence tells us title, author, type of essay, topic, and thesis with an observation that the thesis comes towards the end. Okay, so this is an example of a commentary. It gives you a series of explanation about something. So, ito naman nasa baba, this is an example of a live commentary. So, normally, yung mga sports commentary, yung habang naglalaro, then somebody interprets the game. That's also an example of commentary. So, secondary source yun. Next, critic. It's a detailed analysis and assessment of something. Okay? So, halimbawa, literally, somebody made a critic of a book or a literary piece. So, that is an example of a secondary source. Next. Yeah, evaluation, which is also a secondary source. So, yung mga results class that were given to you, the result of evaluating a situation, okay, determination of the value, the nature, quality of something. Halimbawa, yung assessment nyo sa klase. So, yung mga performances nyo doon, your evaluations are examples of secondary sources. Next, you also have history. Of course, when you say history, it's a whole series of past events connected with someone or something. So, something that was written in the history, it is an example of secondary source. Ayan. I told you right about that newspaper or magazine can be primary or secondary source. Secondary if it doesn't portray information from the eyewitnesses. Like for example, may event, nagsulat lang si author ng tungkol sa event, secondary yon. Pero, like for example, kumuha ng coverage si Jessica Soho, tapos inalagay niya yun sa newspaper or sa magazine, citing kung ano yung mismong exact words or narrative ng eyewitness. Primary yun. Okay? So, that's the difference. Then, you have tertiary sources. Okay? So, this serves as a collection of the primary and secondary sources. So, yung evidence, primary, kung siya ay raw, authentic, first-hand. Take away something from it, you interpret the primary, it becomes secondary. Accumulation of primary and secondary sources, it becomes tertiary sources. Okay? Example, you have bibliography. So, ito normally nakikita nyo sa likod ng mga libro. So, it's a list of all the sources that you have used in the process of researching your work. So, sa college or sa senior high school, when you do your thesis, it cannot be complete if you do not know how to write a bibliography. So in bibliography, you cite the sources of the information na pinagmula ng research mo. Next, you have directories, okay? So, sa your common directory example of tertiary source, kung natatandaan nyo, kung may landline kayo, yung makapal na yellow book noon, na pag tinignan nyo, nandun lahat ng names at saka telephone number ng mga kilala or hindi mo kilalang tao. So that's an example of a directory. It's a book listing the individuals or organizations alphabetically. A directory also can be, say for example, you go to a very big mall, tapos you would want to know kung nasaan yung store ng H&M boutique or ng pen shop or ng Forever 21 and you're not familiar with the place. There's also a directory in there, but it's computer-based directory, or sa airport, you can see something like this, or they provide you with directions. Those are examples of tertiary sources. Next, you have dictionaries. Of course, you know what a dictionary is. It is a book, can also be an online resource, electronic, that lists the words of a language. You give meaning to it. It provides information about pronunciation, origin, the usage, diba? So those are examples of tertiary sources also. Next, you have almanac. When you say almanac, madalang tayo makakita ng almanac, I don't know if you're trying to search for one or visited one, but when you say almanac, it's a book or table that contains a calendar of the days, weeks, and months of the year. Okay, so yeah, that one's a good example of an almanac. So the National Geographic Almanac, they are examples of tertiary sources. Next, you have abstracts. So you normally see abstracts, of course, in researches. It's a summary of the contents of the book, article, formal speeches. It's a short summary of your published or unpublished research paper, which is also classified as a tertiary source. Next, you have index. So index is an alphabetical list of names, subjects with references to the place that they occur. So, cite for example, one that you typically find at the end of the book, kailangan mo yung mga keywords, you wanted to search for keywords is related to what you are finding in that book. So, you look for the index. Okay, so this one is also an example of tertiary source. And then, you have encyclopedias, okay? So, I don't know if you have seen encyclopedias because back then, in our days, when there was yet no internet, the encyclopedia is like your internet. Okay? So, it's a book or a set of book that gives information on many subjects. And aside, for example, you wanted to search for Lord Alfred Tennyson or you simply wanted to explore about the cosmic galaxy. So, hanapin mo lang yung book dyan that has the volume kung nasaan yung letter C for cosmic galaxy. And then, there it is with a bunch of information. Okay? Next, you have databases or the database. So, in database or databases, it's a very huge system. So, it's usually controlled by database management system. Aside, for example, class, a good example is, diba you have your own LRNs. And then, yung LRN nyo na yon sa buong Pilipinas, yan ay encoded under a system or a database which is called the Learner's Information System. Okay, so those are also examples of tertiary sources. Okay. So, using the information gathered, whether they are primary, secondary, or tertiary sources, we have to take note of the 6 characteristics that an information should have. Ano-ano yun? So first, you have accuracy, and information should be accurate. It means it should be reliable, useful, and free from flaws. Ano? So, bibigay ka ng information, make sure that it is correct. Okay? It is accurate, hindi siya chismis. Okay? Next thing, you have completeness. How do you know if an information is complete? So you ask the WH question. If it answers what, who, when, where, why, and how, yes, you have a complete set of information. Timeliness, it should be up to date. Okay? So, syempre, ang relevance ng article or information ay nababago depende kung timely ba siya. Okay, next, you have consistency. So, it should be consistent for it to be considered accurate and useful. So, consistency in data, ibig sabihin, walang masyadong discrepancy or pagbabago. Consistent. Then, relevant. Okay? So, it should suit the demands, the needs, and the interests of the reader. So, para saan ang isinusulat mo if it doesn't concern your target audience? Should be relevant. And lastly, you have uniqueness. It should be distinct. So, you add a little something to it to make it unique or distinct. Yung pagkakakilanlan. Okay? So, now, learning task 5, using a dictionary entry below. Hindi ko to sasagutan, but I'm going to discuss, give you clues, paano nyo siya pwedeng sagutan. Okay? So, discuss what information it can provide to the reader. So, cite for example, class, you have the beetle. Okay? The beetle, itong beetle at saka itong beetle na to, anong tawag sa kanila? So, those are examples of word entry. Okay? So, ibig sabihin, this dictionary entry can provide you with the word entry of beetle, beetle 1 and beetle 2 that has both different meanings given the different context. This one is called an illustration of a beetle. So, ano pa ang binibigay sa ating information ng entry na ito? So, you can talk about this one. Anong tawag dyan? This and that. Anong tawag sa kanila? Okay? So, this one, obviously, is your dictionary meaning. Okay? Okay, how about this one? The sentence here and the sentence there. What are those? So, it doesn't necessarily mean na sa answer sheet nyo ay maglalagay din kayo ng arrows, ha? Okay lang na wala. It can be paragraph type. You just have to explain ano yung nandun sa entry na yan, okay? And then, learning task 6. Okay, give an example of the sources of information based on the classifications below. Alright. Cite, for example, under primary speeches. Okay. So, cite, for example, you have under primary sources, a good example of that is a speech, right? Secondary sources can have commentary. Or like for tertiary sources, textbook is one good example of that too. Right? Okay? So, you fill them up for 15 items. Then lastly, you have learning task 7, get a copy of any news article written in English. Okay? So, you're about to analyze the article by means of providing a summary to the article. Okay, so again, from here, so you have, cite for example, I decided to use an article here on the right side. Nag-research ako, tas na-research ko ito. Metro Manila begins experimental lockdown scheme in bid to reopen economy. So, how are you supposed to write a summary about this long article na nakita nyo, whether it's short or long? Okay, so you can answer these given sets of questions in my left side. So, number 1, what, where, when. You write the information about the headline, the author, and then the target audience. Like, for example, ang tanong na yan ay masasagot nung title nung sinong nagsulat, kailan sinulat. So, there's Metro Manila begins experimental lockdown scheme in bid to reopen economy by Dwight De Leon in September 16, 2021. About 7:58 p.m. Philippine time. Okay, next, number 2. What is the article all about? Write at least 3 gist sentences on the motive and issue of your chosen article. So, syempre, you don't simply copy something. Pag magsusulat ka ng summary, you don't simply cut or copy and then paste it in your summary. So, basahin mo yan tungkol saan yung article mo. So, at least 3 sentences kung tungkol saan na siya. Okay? And then, lastly, for the 5th sentence, the concluding part, did the article ended with an opinion, a recommendation, an appeal, or anticipation? Okay? So, you decide. Siya ba ay nagtapos na nagbibigay ng opinion o nagre-recommend ba siya? Okay? Umaapila. So, determine and then try to explain it briefly. Okay? So, that about sums up your learning task 7 and your lesson. Okay, so that sums about your discussion or your lesson for week 1. Okay, lesson 1, information from various sources. I am Ma'am Denise, and I am very happy to be with you. I do hope that this recording has helped you in your learning despite the hardship or the difficulty that we do not have face-to-face classes yet. Okay, so there you go. Here's hoping to many more recorded sessions with you. Okay, so thank you everyone and God bless you.